A very good evening to everyone present here. I'm Daphne from NSS unit of St. Andrews College. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker for today, Mr. VP Raja Sir, teachers and students, to the webinar on the topic Reflection on Science, Religion and the Clash of Civilization by Public Concern for Governance Trust in collaboration with Vaze MUN, HR College of Commerce and Science, Commerce and Economics, and NSS unit of St. Andrews College. First and foremost, let me give you a brief introduction of Public Concern for Governance Trust. It is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro Sir, Dr. R.K. Anand Sir, and late Mr. B.G. Deshmukh Sir, to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system in order to sensitize and mentor the youth in ethical values with an emphasis on good governance. PCGT started the Youth for Governance YFG program in the year 2012. Previously, PCGT has organized dialogues, workshops, and webinars as requested by the campus ambassadors on issues that are related to good governance and involving eminent speakers and role models in different fields to guide and inspire the youth. VG Vaze College is a multi-faculty institution and the first NAAC accredited college in the state of Maharashtra, with top 5-star ranking, and was re-accredited in the second cycle with A grade by Maharashtra State Board of Secondary and Higher Secondary Education. It has emerged as a role model of quality academic education. Vaze Model United Nations, organized by the 12th grade students of Vaze College, is a learning-oriented conference where we attempt to provide students across India with healthy debate about significant global issues. St. Andrews College. St. Andrews College, located in Bandra, was founded back in 1983 and is a learning space for more than 4,000 junior college as well as degree college students, with an A grade and AAC accreditation and the motto, Enlighten the Darkness. St. Andrews aims to prepare students for a bright future. The NSS National Service Scheme unit of St. Andrews College has always been well known for actively participating in numerous activities like blood donation drives, awareness campaigns, beach cleanups, and more. NSS not only helps its volunteers to develop a more outgoing personality through social work and turning the youth into sensitized citizens, it also actively engages to help the underprivileged and people in times of need. At the outset, let me also take the opportunity to introduce HR College. HR College is one of the leading commerce, management, and economic colleges affiliated to the University of Mumbai, Bombay. It is a well-known name providing quality education. Our college holds the distinction of being awarded the highest grade, that is 3.72 by NAAC, and was awarded the best college in Mumbai by the University of Mumbai. It is a matter of pride to share that HR College, based on its performance in NAAC and other parameters, along with KC College and Bombay Teacher Training College, has become Constituent College of HSNC University, Bombay, Mumbai, which is a state cluster university incorporated by the government of Maharashtra by notification issued on 30th October 2019. Now about our speaker, the Reverend Mr. VP Raja Sir. After obtaining 2 graduate degrees in physics from Delhi University and Columbia University, USA, respectively, joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1974. While in service, he completed an MA in Rural Development Planning from the University of East Anglia, UK. He further obtained an MPhil degree in Social Sciences from the Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. As an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre, he has worked in various assignments at the district, state, and center. In recognition of his outstanding contribution to the administrative reforms while working as a collector of Satara and as Transport Commissioner Maharashtra, Mr. Raja was awarded the Distinguished Government Administration Award. With the Government of India, he worked at the Ministry of Human Resource Development, the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Defense, and at the Department of Atomic Energy. He retired as the Principal Advisor of the Department of Atomic Energy in September 2008. Thereafter, he was the Chairman of Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission, MERC, for a period of 5 years till he attained the age of 65. Concurrently, he was also the chairman of the Expert Appraisal Committee of the Ministry of Environment and Forests of the Government of India for appraising of new projects for coal mining and thermal power projects from the point of view of their environmental impacts. Mr. Raja continues to be actively involved in various issues of the energy sector. He has a passion for teaching, coaching, and mentoring young students. He is a visiting faculty both at Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, University of Mumbai, and the BSc Institute of the Bombay Stock Exchange, teaching courses centered on statistics, business research, and quantitative methods and economics. A couple of instructions before we begin. Please keep your microphones on mute at all times. Please directly unmute and speak if you have to ask or answer or ask a question. You're requested to keep your cameras on if possible. Also, we would be having a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please note them down. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Daphne, for your nice words of introduction. I'm also happy to see students from Vaze College, HR College, and St. Andrews College. I presume the average age group of the people whom I'm addressing is about 17 to 20. Am I right? Of course, I see Atharva Rawat, grade 6. How old are you, Atharva?
I am 11 years old.
Okay, you're welcome. So perhaps Atharva is the youngest person present here. Am I right to assume that most others are, let's say, 16 to 20? Or if there is, I would like to know the age group which I'm addressing so that I can, it's always useful to know. Devin, you have an answer to that? Need not be very exact, but all are welcome. But I'm assuming since you're from 3 colleges, it must be that. Right. I will perhaps talk for about half an hour or 45 minutes, and then we can have a free question answer session. I basically said reflections on religion, science, religion, and clash of civilizations. Today, all of us know what is science. But science as an organized activity is just about 300, 350 years old, or you can stretch it to 400. It's not that before that people didn't do science, but a few individuals did it. Like all of you would have heard of these alchemists who will do some. So individuals engaged in science, but science as an organized activity where you find thousands and thousands of researchers working in laboratory. Now, recently you see this in the last 2 years, how much work has been done on producing vaccines for the COVID-19 pandemic. Many companies, many researchers, many research organizations. That is called organized science, where it's not an individual activity, where thousands of people, scientists and technologists are working together. So science as such an organized activity is more recent. Maybe 100, 200 years. Otherwise, science did exist, but individuals who were passionate about it did it. So before that era, when only a few individuals engaged in science with their own experiments, what did education consist of? Education was basically study of the scriptures, which basically meant studying the scriptures of the religion in which you were born. So Jews studied the Old Testament, Christians studied the New Testament, people belonging to Islam studied the Quran, people who were born Hindus studied the scriptures associated with Hinduism, that is the Vedas and the Upanishads. Similarly, when it comes to Sikhism or Jainism, etc. So an educated person or a well-educated person was a person who had studied the scriptures. Of course, there was a problem. Not many could study it because the scriptures were written in languages and not everybody in a country could speak that language. Like in India, most of the Hindu scriptures were written in Sanskrit. So only people who knew Sanskrit could read it. Till over a period of time, translation started becoming available. Like in Maharashtra, it was the saint called Saint Naneshwar who first translated Bhagavad Gita to Marathi. So prior to Naneshwar, prior to the Saint Naneshwar translating the Bhagavad Gita to Marathi, only people who knew Sanskrit could read it. So the moment it was translated, of course, people who knew Marathi could read it. Now, of course, most religious texts are available in most languages of the world. But the point I wanted to make was religion or religious texts, whatever you call it, was the main education. That started changing with discoveries in science. And to be very frank, maximum of these discoveries have occurred only in the last 100 years. That is because science, let's say, found a method of doing things in a certain systematic fashion. And scientists understood the methodology of science. And this methodology of science consisted of doing experiments, making observations based on that experiment, noting it down. And the moment you do a number of experiments, you start seeing some rough patterns. And the moment you see some patterns, you generalize it. That is how science progresses. And by this method, systematic experiments could be set up, and these kinds of observations could be made. For those of you who are in college, this method of observing various things, and then the moment you see a pattern, generalizing it, that is called inductive logic. That is, I see one crow which is black, a second crow which is black. By the time I've seen 50 crows, even though I have not seen all the crows in the world, since the 50 crows I saw, all of them were black, I generalize and say all crows are black. So from a limited number of observations, the moment you see a pattern, you generalize it. That's called inductive logic. But when you generalize, well, you can be wrong also. That is, over a period of time, you may find something which doesn't fit into this generalization. Then you change your theory. Like all bears are, let us say, grayish black. Till you started finding bears in the polar region, which are white. Then you have to change your statement to say that all bears other than those living in the polar regions are grayish black. So your previous theory doesn't become completely wrong, but it gets modified. So science also involves continuously striving to find the limits of validity of existing theories. And the moment you find the limits of validity, the previous theory becomes a subset of the new theory. So the method of science is every theory is subject to a continuous verification or falsification. Nothing is taken for granted. You have to verify it or attempt to falsify it. So verification and falsification are the methods used for progress in science. Like now in the last 2 years, you would have been seeing these various data coming on efficacy of vaccines. This is also done by a lot of observations. Now perhaps we don't know, a new variant has come called Omicron. And what will work against Omicron, only these kinds of what they call as genome sequencing, which is again making observations from patients who have got that particular variety of the virus. Those samples are taken, put into laboratory, verified. So this is the way science moves. But this method led to fantastic progress in the last 200 years in subjects like physics, chemistry, biology, and along with mathematics, which is a different kind of subject because mathematics is abstract, but is a very powerful tool. It is actually a language where you can think much more than normal languages. Like when we speak English or Hindi or Marathi or Tamil or Bengali, we express our thoughts in words in one dimension, so to say. While in mathematics, you can think in multiple dimensions. You can draw a graph and say this x-axis, this y-axis. You can draw in 3 dimensions. You can even draw in n dimensions. So it's a kind of a language, but a very specialized language. So mathematics, and with the help of mathematics, the sciences have had an enormous success. Success in the sense, growth of knowledge. To be very frank, now I am 73 years old. As I was introduced by Defane, she told all of you that initially I studied physics. Let me tell you, if I were to be born again, I will continue to do science in my younger age. I'll prefer doing science and mathematics because of a very systematic method by which it progresses. Mathematics is done by what is called deductive logic, which leads to some certainty in it. Like there cannot be 2 answers to the question that what is a plus b the whole squared is s squared plus 2ab plus b squared. That's the only answer. Or sine squared theta plus cos squared theta is equal to 1. That is the only answer. That is because mathematics step by step follows what is called deductive logic. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. That is deductive logic. And mathematics uses that. While the sciences also use deductive logic, but over and above deductive logic, it uses inductive logic. That is, make limited number of observations. The moment you see a pattern, generalize it. That is inductive logic. But in the process, you should be aware that you can be wrong. So science always requires, when we say scientific temperament, it means having a healthy skepticism. You can be wrong. I must look at facts like a small child, always and every time. I should never become dogmatic. I can't say this is the only right thing. No, I can be wrong. That's why when science is done by a large number of people, they write papers, attend conferences, the papers are available in journals. So this is how progress takes place in science. The basic science being physics, chemistry, biology, and all the applied sciences, engineering and technology based on this. Like all this genome project or biology. Today, so many medicines are produced artificially. People who take insulin because they're having a sugar problem. Most people are now taking artificially manufactured insulin. So all these developments have taken place thanks to the science. But science believes in verifiability and or falsifiability. From there comes the point, but there are things which occur in our mind which you can neither verify nor falsify. You really don't know. For example, all of us talk of God. We pray. But can we answer the question, does God exist? Some will say yes, but that is not by verification or falsification. That is by faith. I believe, I have firm faith. Now, so religion comes in person's life. One way it comes is you're born in a family, and wherever you're born, they're practicing some form of religion. So you are kind of brought up in the tradition. However small you are, you will celebrate the various festivals associated with that religion. So in the process, you will get to know the traditions associated with it, what is cooked at home at that time, what is the kind of prayer that is recited. So let us say most people get socialized in the religion in which they are born. Of course, even within that, as people grow up, some have a greater amount of faith, some have a lesser amount of faith, some may even question it. Okay, that's fine. Yes, second method by which people, you get socialized into a particular religion, but certain events that occur in life, that occurs as you grow up, not necessarily when you're very young, and you're not able to explain why did this happen to me, and you undergo what can be called as, you start taking more interest in religion. When you face problems for which you're not able to understand why, you start visiting temples or mosques or gurudwaras. That is often referred to as in your life, you undergo a religious conversion, not conversion from one religion to another. You start taking more interest in religion. So, human beings cannot escape religion because there are questions in the world which cannot be answered by science. There are many questions in the world which cannot be answered by science. Yes, thanks to science, now we are using the Zoom platform. Thanks to science, man has been able to land in the moon. Thanks to science, we are having satellites going around the earth. Lots of achievements. But in spite of all that, there are many questions that come as we grow up as human beings, which cannot be answered by science. So that requires a different frame of reference. And often, that frame of reference, I'm only saying often, most often than not, is provided by religion. By religion, I mean something much broader. Like you may not believe in God and still you can be religious. You can be an atheist, but still religious. What I mean by that is, actually, religion has two dimensions. One dimension of religion is your relationship as you feel in your mind with God, however you define God. That's a vertical dimension of religion. The other dimension is a horizontal dimension. When you see other human beings or interact with other human beings, there is a relationship. So if you see God in other human beings, that's a horizontal dimension of religion. So there are people who may have a lot of questions regarding the vertical dimension and yet could be very, very spiritual and religious because they believe in the horizontal dimension. Then there are people who atheists, who don't believe in God. But that does not mean that the questions which can't be answered by science does not come to the mind. It does. Then there are people called agnostics who say to questions like God, immortality, freedom, do you have free will? For all these things, they say, I don't know. I neither deny nor affirm. I really don't know. Such people are called agnostic. This word agnosticism was introduced by a very famous person called T.H. Huxley. And since has continued. So, but all this are religion. Religion also deals with things like, why is there evil in the world? Some of you would have heard about this great monk in Belur Mutt near Calcutta called Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Swami Vivekananda was a disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. If you go to Calcutta, this place called Belur Mutt is about 70 or 80 kilometers from Calcutta. And it's a beautiful place to visit. So one of the disciples of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa asked him this question, Guruji, why is there evil in the world? And the answer Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gave was, you're asking the wrong question. Assume that you're in a very big lake, which is full of water, and you're in a boat. You're in a boat traveling from one bank of that lake to the other bank. The question that you're asking is, why is there water in the lake? So perhaps even evil is a purpose in the world. But what you must take care is to ensure that that water does not enter your boat. If the water enters your boat, the boat will sink. The reason I mentioned this is the best answer I have found in my various discussions and readings on the problem of evil. The answer which Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gave to his disciple. So I gave some of these examples to say that even though science has progressed a lot, there are many things in life for which the framework of science does not provide you a satisfactory answer. And you need a framework of religion. There's a very famous paleontologist. See, paleontology is a subject between fossils and plants. We say that rocks, fossils, etc. are inanimate. But suddenly, you get algae, which is a plant. So that study of the region between fossils and plants is called paleontology. And a very famous paleontologist is a person called Stephen J. Gould. S-T-E-P-H-E-N, Stephen J. G-O-U-L-D. And he's a very interesting person to read because he was a great paleontologist, but he took a kind of vow that whatever I write, I will write it in a fashion so that a common literate person can read and understand it. Not merely my colleague scientists, but I will read it, write in a fashion where anybody who is literate should be able to read and understand. He has written a book called The Rock of Ages, not the ages of rock, the other bit, The Rock of Ages, where he beautifully explains the need for both science and religion. What he calls as their non-overlapping magisteriums. It is like a railway track. In a railway track, you have two lines. You have two railway lines, and the train travels on those two lines. So for human beings to live successfully, you need both the lines. One is the line of science, another is this line of, he calls them as non-overlapping magisterium or noma, or two different frames of reference. Again, it is this writings of Stephen J. Gould, which has impressed me a lot on this. So this much about science and religion. But there is another angle to it. That is, if you go into the philosophical underpinnings of all religions say one and the same thing. That is the unity of man, the unity of human beings. That we are all part of the same whole. Whether you study what is called the Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism or any religion, including Islam, Sikhism, there is no difference. Yet, what is the common experience of hundreds and thousands of years of human civilization? Religions have often propagated themselves by means which are repugnant to the spirit of religion. All religions say the same thing. All religion preaches love. All religion preaches good humanity. Be kind to everybody. And yet, religions have often propagated themselves by means which are repugnant to religion. Unfortunately, it continues to do so even now. That is, as we grow up, for some reason or the other, people feel a little insecure. Insecurity comes because you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. The uncertainty of tomorrow. Anything can happen. So because of that insecurity, you find a little comfort. You first find comfort within your own family. Then you find comfort within the community to which you belong. You find comfort in the language group to which you belong. You find comfort within the caste group to which you belong. And you find comfort in the religious group to which you belong. So a certain plurality comes. Actually, this plurality needs to be celebrated. That is what Mahatma Gandhi used to call unity in diversity. It'll be so boring if everybody was identical. So this plurality needs to be celebrated. But sometimes this plurality gets exploited. And often it can lead to civilizational clashes. It can lead to civilizational clashes. And that has occurred in history. Continues to occur. So these are the methods by which human beings in the world feel different or start feeling different. Can be based on a number of things. It can be based on race. After all, the fair person and the Negro, the entire history of slavery, when slaves were brought from Africa and made to work as slaves, chained. There is a beautiful novel which you must note down and read called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin is a beautiful story. If you do a Google search, you'll get it in a freely downloadable form of how a slave lived in the United States. But what is the difference? It is only color. And even today, that problem is not totally disappeared. Even though legally slavery has been abolished, legally there can't be any discrimination. But some of you may be aware that 2 years ago, rather last year, 2020, there was this big movement called Black Lives Matter. when a white police officer in America killed a black person, and the entire country reacted by coming out to the streets, and a movement came called Black Lives Matter. So race is one differentiation. Second can be ethnicity. That is, you look different. In fact, ethnicity actually is a problem which exists even in India. Occasionally, everywhere, you can make out a person who has come from any of the northeastern states, let's say from Manipur or Tripura, because they look ethnically different. And there have been situations in recent times also. I think again it happened in last year, when many of the people, youth belonging to the Northeast, got scared in Bangalore and went back to the States because of some local people trying to harm them. That is ethnicity. You look ethnically different. Caste, religion. So these differences get exploited. And there are civilizational differences also, which get exploited. Today also, that is happening in our own country. I don't want to get into the politics of it. And it has happened in the past also. There have been wars, the so-called Spanish Inquisitions, which were based on religion. There have been wars between Jews and Christians. Whatever happened in Nazi Germany was because Hitler believed that the purity of the Aryan race must be maintained and the Jews must be exterminated. But in all this, unfortunately, science has also played a part. That is because in all the wars that have occurred in human history, if you make an analysis, the country or the group which had greater firepower always won the war. The group or the country which had greater firepower, explosive power. That's why there was so much development of explosives, various kinds of guns. The Nazis exterminated the Jews in gas chambers. In the First World War, aircrafts were used for the first time. And then the country which had greater air power had a dominating position. So nations or governments started funding what is called big science. There's a positive and a negative side to it. Nations funding, for example, America funded a big project called the Manhattan Project. The idea was to produce an atom bomb. But that funding has some positive things. A lot of science grows because you get funding, you can buy equipment, you can do more experiments. But the intention of the funding is so that you're more prepared for war. It has positives and negatives. You get a lot of spin-off, faster growth in science. So a lot of growth in science has occurred because of big science being funded with a military aim in mind. Otherwise, why should governments fund it? That has happened with the space program. That is happening with the missile program throughout the world. We still don't know. Perhaps this nobody knows the exact answer to that, but it is quite possible that this COVID-19 itself was part of a biological experiment where an accident took place at the Wuhan laboratory in China. So the point I'm trying to make is organized science gets funded by governments basically with defense or the military in mind. That there are some positive spin-offs and some negative spin-offs. And this kind of a problem continues right now throughout the world. Most of big funding of science is done for defense or military purposes. That's why countries try to make weapons of mass destruction, for which you need science, engineering, technology. You need all that. And the motivation for funding it is military, so that you can win a future war. Same with cyber wars. There's a lot of spending going on how to have offensive cyber capabilities. So one thing is clear, even though a lot of progress and a lot of increase in knowledge has taken place in what are referred to as the STEM subjects, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's also true that the job potential in these areas, at least in the foreseeable future of the next 30, 40 years, will continue to be much, much higher than the job potential in other areas. In spite of all that, a study of only the STEM subjects does not necessarily give you the wisdom to use it only for good purposes. I talked about this Manhattan Project. There was an extremely famous nuclear scientist called Oppenheimer, who, after the first test of the atomic weapon, refused to participate further in the Manhattan Project. For reasons, no, I don't want to be associated with the production of a weapon of mass destruction. But examples like Oppenheimer's are small in number. The majority of the scientists and engineers and technologists, as long as they get good pay and monetary incentive, they are willing to work on projects which eventually will be used for harming human beings. So, my personal opinion is good education should include study of both the science and the liberal arts. That is, the science, of course, improves your analytical abilities, science and mathematics, which is the left side of your brain. While whatever skills and knowledge you have acquired, you're going to use it for the good of human beings, or knowingly or unknowingly use it for destructive purposes, does not depend on knowledge. It depends on wisdom. And that wisdom comes from a knowledge of music, literature, history, poetry, philosophy, etc. In fact, some of our Upanishads have beautiful, call it stories or parables, to teach wisdom. The Isa Upanishad, the Kena Upanishad, the Chandogya Upanishad, they all teach what can be called as the spiritual side, what will give wisdom. So I feel that since a domain knowledge of science is required for everybody today, perhaps liberal arts colleges must have compulsory courses, let us say, science for literature students, or mathematics for poetry students. And science colleges should have compulsory courses called poetry for physicists. A good education requires both science, because you'll miss out a lot in the world if you don't have some minimum knowledge of science. So I think my kind of advice is that we should come to a system where wholesome human beings are produced from a very young age, right from junior college stage, where scientists learn poetry. This, to some extent, happens in the good universities in the West. For example, everybody who's a graduate in some of the best universities in the world, they know the history of Western civilization. They all would have studied things like Plato and Aristotle, etc. Here we need to improve that. But what is important is to create such wholesome human beings. And I think college education plays a very major role in this. I think I'll stop at this point. I notice the time is almost 5 o'clock, so that there is sufficient time for question answers. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, sir. So now we'll be opening the question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, do raise your hand and put your questions in the chat box.
You can unmute and ask a question. I don't see anything in the chat box has come. So by the time 1 or 2 questions are asked by unmuting, others will get encouraged to either ask or put it in the chat box.
Great. Do raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question.
If there are no questions, we can close this session.
Sir, we are getting questions. I'll just forward. Just a minute. So there's a question asking, is casteless society possible?
Pardon?
There's a question asking,
Hmm.
is casteless society possible?
Casteless society or classless?
Casteless, CASTLESS.
Yes, it is possible. It is possible. Of course, we are nowhere near it in India. But please remember that that was the intention of a number of social reformers, including the framers of our constitution. Both Mahatma Gandhi and Ambedkar eventually wanted a casteless society. That has not happened, but it can happen. It can happen. It depends on the people, how the younger generation grows. See, for example, in the Indian Constitution, which we gave ourselves on 26th of November 1949, by way of affirmative action, reservations were provided for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in proportion to the population in the country, which was roughly about 15% reservation for scheduled castes and about 7.5% reservation for scheduled tribes. And when the constitution was made, these reservations were to be for a period of 15 years after the commencement of the constitution. So the constitution commenced in 1950. So at least in 1950, the thinking was that we will become more or less a casteless society, and there is at least no need for affirmative action, no need for reservations by 1965. But that has not happened. It has not happened because these divisions were used for electoral purposes by political groupings. But theoretically, it can happen. Not theoretically, practically also. If leaders, if all our leaders become statesmen, it can happen.
Sir, we have one more question. Is there any way science supports religion?
Can you repeat it anyway?
Is there any way science supports religion?
Suppose religion means I didn't understand that exactly.
Supports religion.
Science
Support religion.
supports religion.
Yes, sir.
Well, there are some people who believe that science itself is a religion. See, religion, as I said, deals with things which at the moment science is not able to explain. It deals with why am I born? Is there a purpose in life? What happens to me after death? Are we immortal? Are we really free when we take decisions every day about our own life? Do we have free will? Now, these are all questions on which, as of today, science has no answer. Science is certainly working hard to see, particularly this subject called genetics. See, as you know, only in the year 1953, if I remember from memory, the structure of the deoxyribonucleic acid, which is what is called DNA, the basic building block of human life, called DNA, which is a double helix where 4 principal proteins, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, are connected by phosphorus bonds. This structure was discovered by 2 scientists called James Watson and Francis Crick in the year 1953. After that was 53. Now we are in 2021. By now, through a project called the Genome Project, all genes which form a human body has been found. Now the work that is going on, again by thousands and thousands of researchers throughout the world, is what is called genetic engineering. That is, each of those genes, you isolate the gene and try to remove something, add something. I'm somewhat knowledgeable on this because my own daughter, my daughter studied BSc Life Sciences from St. Xavier's College here in Mumbai. And after that did MSc Biochemistry from the Nair Hospital in Mumbai. Thereafter went abroad and did a PhD in genetics and molecular biology from the Ohio State University in the US. And at the moment, she is a postdoctoral at the Harvard Medical School. And she's working on what is called methylation of cytosine. That is part of this genetic engineering. So like this, it's not just my daughter, thousands of people are doing this kind of work. So we don't know, perhaps after many, many years, they may be able to discover what gives us emotions, what makes us angry, what makes us happy. But we are certainly very, very far away. But where we are nearer is, you are able to, because of this genetic engineering, you are able to more and more identify the cause of diseases. And the moment you identify a cause of a disease, you are also automatically able to identify the cure for it. That is happening quite successfully. That is why even when this COVID pandemic came, the vaccines for it came in a very fast time, literally in 1 year's time. That is science. But to answer your question, whether science will be able to, what is the word you use? Support religion, as to how religious, I don't know. In any case, it's very far away.
One more question. It is, what is the conflict between science and religion?
You said conflict?
Yeah.
There is no conflict. As I said, what I believe in is what are stated by, note down the name of this book. You can later do a Google search of it, called The Rock of Ages, the ROCK, The Rock of Ages, by Stephen J. Gould. Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N, J, G-O-U-L-D. The Rock of Ages by Stephen J. Gould. Or you do a Google search of NOMA, N-O-M-A, concept of Stephen J. Gould. In that, what Stephen J. Gould explains is science and religion are like in a railway track. You have two lines, right? Separated by a certain distance. So science is one line, religion is another line. You need both. That's, I found that argument most satisfying to me. That's why I mentioned it. So I don't see any conflict between the two. They deal with different, to try to answer different things in life. As I mentioned earlier also, science cannot provide answer to everything with which a human being is concerned with. Got it, Shristri?
Yes, sir. Thank you for answering all the questions. It was really a great session. So now I think we should move ahead. We'll start with the thanking note. Before, I'll suggest everyone to please switch on your cameras. We can even take a nice photo of everyone.
Many are not switching on the cameras. Why?
Anyways, we'll go ahead.
Please switch on your cameras.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an informative webinar, and thank you to everyone who joined us today for such a great thing. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to everyone who took the time and effort to be with us today. It gives us great pleasure to have such an amazing audience. I would like to mention some of the dignitaries whom this event wouldn't have been possible. The PCGT trustees, Mr. Julio Rubero, sir, and Mr. VP Raja. Sir, thank you for such a progressive and constant effort. Further, I would also like to thank Vaze College Principal, Dr. Preeta Nilesh Ma'am, Vice Principal Degree College, CA Anil Naik, and Vice Principal Junior College, CA Vidyadhar Joshi, our teacher, Ms. Sangeeta Hera Ma'am, thank you ma'am so much, St. Andrews College, Dr. Mary Fernandez, and Program Officer of NSS Unit of St. Andrews College, CA Richard George, for helping to organize this webinar. We thank you all. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, sir, so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you, Raja,
Thank
sir,
you.
so much for
Thank
joining.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir, so much. It was
You've been
really
very, very supportive of the, campus ambassadors' requests, etc. So we're very grateful.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. It is lovely, like, to listen to you always. Your examples that you give, it's really so nice, like, to listen to you always. It's our privileged, really
Thank you.
privileged.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We are having one more webinar, sir, later on. I'll share the link. I'll tell Ruja to share the link with you
Okay.
on Afghanistan issue.
Great.
So if you're free, you can join.
Certainly. Send the link.
22nd December, 5 p.m.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
Yes,
So let
sir.
me take
Thank you.
leave.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am.
Thank you so much. Take care, all of you.
Yes, ma'am, you
Thank
too.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Abuzet. I think we can end the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Take care, all of you.